Hey everybody, happy hump day, welcome back. Just wanted to do a quick video here and my thoughts about it, especially if the working world and technology's come a long way. And I did feel it from what I did read is that because of like technology, especially with jobs being eliminated, cut back, and it makes sense now that I think back on it, that's how I remember it. But someone said, yeah, that back in 2005, and it sounds about right. That's when things really started to change. That's when it became like a different world, especially the working world. I don't know like the age. I know some of you, your ages. Most of you, I don't know your ages. My 48 subscribers. I don't know how many of you remember it. I mean, I just turned 40, so I started working when I was 16 back in '96. But not sure how many of you are old enough to remember. But I remember the days when I liked it back then. I remember the days when you could just go into a place, any place, and just fill out an application on paper right then and there. And sometimes, a lot of times actually, I got interviewed right then and there. The manager or somebody would look over it, and a lot of times they'd be impressed, and they do like on-the-spot interviews. But those days, for the most part, are gone. Everything's online now, and it's just, doing it on the spot, you actually know that somebody's getting your application. You actually know that you're turning in, somebody's getting it. But when you do it online, on the computer, on a job website, the company website, it's like you just wonder, is somebody actually viewing my application? Are they only like viewing a certain number of applications? It'd be nice to get a response either way. It's like you wonder if they're getting lost in the mix. And the one thing that I really don't like is that the hiring process, like it used to be the person that called you in for the interview, they was the boss. You still had to do a background check and a drug test, but through the company. But the person that interviewed you was the boss, and they were the ones that decided whether they wanted to hire you or not hire you. But those days seem to be gone for the most part too. Nowadays, there's just a lot more pressure. It's almost like you're going through multiple interviews, because what I found is a lot of these companies, they have recruiters now, and it's like the recruiter is the one that more than likely looking over your application, your resume, and they decide whether they want to consider you or not, and then they call you, and then they're interviewing you over the phone. So that's like one interview, I'd say. And then they decide if they want to move forward or not. And if they want to move forward, then they set you up with another, like an on-site interview with the boss, the potential boss. And a lot of these interviews now, it's not just like one-on-one. I like one-on-one interviews, but I do not feel comfortable at all with panel interviews where it's like 2 or 3 people. That just makes me feel really uncomfortable, because one person, it's like you're talking to them, they're talking to you, so it's like it's a no-brainer that's who you make eye contact with. But when there's 2 or 3 people, or even more than that, I've never had more than 3, but it's kind of like, okay, who do you make eye contact with? Do you just keep it on one person you're talking to? I mean, obviously the person's talking to you, I make eye contact with them, but then it's like when you're talking back, do you look at the one person that asked you the question? Do you make eye contact with all 3? And it didn't used to be behavioral. It's just it's kind of like their way of weeding people out. There's a lot of like trick questions now. It's like behavioral, strategy based, all these trick questions. It used to be that it was just like, they looked over your resume, what's your work experience, and that was easy. But now there's just all these, trick questions. It's like it's kind of hard to know how to answer them. It's like, how do you want to be managed? They ask all these other questions, like tell me about a time that you made a mistake. Like, what would you do if you made a mistake? How would you handle it? How would you handle conflicts with a coworker? What's another one that I got asked? I'm trying to think about it, but it was, yeah, it's just all like behavioral based. Really, like telling me about time if you had a conflict with a coworker, how did you handle it? It's just really hard to know what type of answer that they're looking for. It's like, tell me about yourself. It's like, well, okay, where do you want me to start? I've been working for 23 years, so it's kind of like, that's a loaded question, I think. It's like, be specific. What do you want to know? Where do you want me to start? And it just feels like, these questions could just, make you or break you. You could have the qualifications. Maybe somebody's not as qualified, but they just, are lucky, or they just know how to answer these questions in maybe a more suitable, better way. And yeah, it's just all a mind game now. All a mind game. It's just like their way. If I know my brother used to be a teacher, he's not a teacher anymore. He decided to get out of teaching and be a bartender. But there was one school that he was an orchestra teacher, and they were accepting. There's so much competition now too, and they were accepting 1,000 resumes. It's like, how do you begin? How do you even have time to look over 1,000 resumes? And I imagine the qualifications that people have to get the job are very similar. So it's like, how do you differentiate? I imagine a lot of people's resumes in that case look very much the same. A bachelor's degree in music education, or with an emphasis on music, orchestra, what have you. And technology has like bank tellers. You kind of put people out of jobs, at airports, ticket agents. Now you go to a kiosk, you go to an ATM, instead of going to, up to an agent, instead of going up to, a bank teller, now you go to an ATM. It's, technology has made life easier. It's, online banking. It's made life easier, but in a way, it's put people on a job. I couldn't, when I first moved out to Arizona, I was looking to get a job as a medical records clerk, because I did 10 years prior. Happy what I'm doing now, but it's like I couldn't really find a job as a medical records clerk, because it's kind of a job that's gotten replaced by technology. Records used to be on paper, but now they're all electronic, so they don't really have to pay somebody to file by hand, to alphabetize. Now they can just, my job that I left back in Illinois, they just eliminated it, but they didn't fill it, because it's, they switched to electronic records, and now the nurses on night shift, they didn't fill it. The nurses on night shift, they don't have as much to do, so they just pay nurses, they just figure, they can have a nurse do it, scan the records in on night shift when there's not a whole lot to do. So yeah, it's just a different world, and nowadays, it kind of defeats the purpose of a raise. Nowadays, most jobs, it's just standard, like a 3% raise, and sometimes you don't even get a raise. Sometimes it's less than that. You should feel fortunate to get a 3% raise, and it seems like every year your health insurance premium goes up, so it's like, that's usually the same amount of what your raise is, so it's like it kind of defeats the whole purpose of a raise. Your paycheck is the same. And my wife, I figured it out, like she started as a nurse, $30 an hour, and she got like a 45% raise after a year, and it came out to be like 1.5%. Like, my God, it's amazing. That's what our world's coming to. It's amazing. And my parents, when they first bought their first house back in 76, 77, after they got married, they said that they were both working full time, and they were kind of struggling. But my dad said, back in the 70s and 80s, people were getting like 10% raises a year. So, you made $10 an hour, bam, the next year, 10% is $1 of $10 an hour. So you make $11 an hour. And my dad said that him and my mom are kind of struggling when they bought their first house, but every year it got so much easier because they were both getting like 10% raises. But yeah, the early 90s, things changed with that. Things changed with technology starting to advance, especially with Caterpillar. That's a company that started going downhill. That used to be the company to work for, but after 1990, that recession in 1990 during the Gulf War, the George Bush Sr. era, George H.W. Bush, that's when those days started to slowly fade away. And Caterpillar is not a company to where I think back in during that recession, they laid a whole bunch of people off. So that company, for example, is not what it used to be. So yeah, I'm going to get into work. I think that's all I had to cover, the gist of it. That's the story, my thoughts on that. Don't know how much more things are going to change in the coming future, but yeah, it is, especially with jobs, I've noticed, it is a different world. And yeah, some job is like, everything's online, and some of them it's like, oh yeah, if you don't have, not everybody has a computer, not everybody has the access to this technology. And I've seen a lot where it's like, oh, they only accept online applications, online resumes. Like, if you don't have access to that, you don't have the ability to do that, it's like, don't even bother applying. It's kind of shitty. I know one job I applied for, I couldn't, my internet speed at the time, it just wasn't, or like my computer just wasn't compatible with their online application. And the recruiter I talked to said a lot of people had issues with that. And I said, is there a way that I could, can you make an exception for me that I could do like an online, or a paper application? He says, oh no, there's no other way, there's no other option, sorry. He's like, I know it's a pain in the butt, but that's just the way it is. And I think I didn't have Google Chrome. I think I did end up getting Google Chrome, or I installed that Adobe Flash Player, whatever it's called, and that made it compatible, but it still took like 2 or 3 hours to do it. It was buffering, freezing up like crazy. So, and I ended up not getting that job after all that trouble I went through. Go figure. But anyways, that's my story on that. I'm going to get to work. Love you all. Comment, like, share, subscribe. Until next time, America.